We will be conducting tonight's meeting here in City Council chambers as well as virtually using Zoom. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting tonight on Wave Channel 18 and online through the city's YouTube channel. If you would like to participate in live public comment via the Zoom platform, please refer to the agenda for instructions. Pastor Stephen Hay from the Salt Mine Church will be giving the invocation tonight, and Mayor Carl Skint will begin the meeting immediately after.
Good now? Thank you for inviting me to pray.
Yes, thank you for coming.
It's an honor. I know it's a simple thing, but it's an honor. So if you guys would join me in prayer, get going. So thank you, Lord, that you care for our city, its citizens, and the future of this place that we call home. We thank you, Lord, for giving us leaders who care so deeply about its future, and that you have given them to us as a blessing to lead us. And I ask, Father, that everything that is discussed tonight, everything that is decided tonight and planned for our future is that it is a blessing, and that your wisdom and your knowledge be a part of it. We thank you, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, guys.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City of Lincoln 2024 regular meeting of the City Council, Lincoln Redevelopment Successor Agency, Lincoln Public Financing Authority for July 9th of 2024. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Andriotta,
I'm here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Joyner,
Here.
and Mayor Carl Skint.
Present.
Sorry, I almost said yes. Like, forgot where we were at. Sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
Now, I'd like you all to stand while we honor our nation with the Pledge of Allegiance by Jennifer Brown, our Chief Innovation Officer.
Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We didn't have one?
I can make that easy. We didn't have one, so there is
Have
none.
one. There you go. No, Mayor.
public comment on non-agenda items within the purview and the subject matter of the council can be heard at this time. We allow 3 minutes per person. Is there anyone that wishes to make public comment? No pressure.
We do have a
You're
few
online.
folks, but no hands are raised, Mayor.
Okay, none here, none there, none anywhere. So we'll close public comment. The consent agenda, items on the consent agenda will be, unless pulled for discussion, will be all exercised with one vote. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to pull an item? Anyone on staff that wishes to pull an item? Anyone in the public that wishes to pull an item? Nobody online?
We do have a hand raise, Frank Neves.
This is Frank.
I-
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Did you have an item on consent that you wanted to pull off?
You know, I don't know if consent or not. I have something about 193.
You want to talk to citizens addressing the council?
Yeah, citizens addressing the council. So I guess I should wait.
No, you should have done it 5 minutes.
Past
ago.
that.
We
Right.
can't hear you very well.
Okay,
You can go ahead and let us know. Yeah, go back.
okay, I'll reopen public comment so we can hear about Highway 193.
You want, can you speak now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I am concerned about the situation at 193 and Oak Tree Lane. We go to the Catholic Church down Oak Tree Lane. And I think it's a very dangerous situation. You know, they're working on it now, but you know, the way I see it happening is it's going to be 6 months, if not longer, before that project is completed. And that light is so direly needed. The other day I was making a left turn onto 193 from Oak Tree. And I looked both ways twice. Everything was cleared. I started making the left turn. All of a sudden, I see a motorcyclist come down. Fortunately, he was far enough away from me. I avoided hitting him because it would have been disaster. But when you get to that, when you get on Oak Tree Lane to the road to 193, it's the visibility on both sides can be a problem. And those people are traveling at freeway speed, especially coming to downtown Lincoln. My thought is, especially if this project's going to be delayed in terms of the light installation, my thought is we need to have some significant signage on 193 telling people to slow down because of cross traffic. The other thing to keep in mind is the people that come out of that church are often very elderly people, older people. Reflexes are not as good as younger people. And making that turn without a light is really a danger, a real danger. So I hope that the city's plan is to get that light installed soon. In fact, do you have a timeline for installation?
I'll complete your discussion and I'll try to get that. Have you got anything more to say, Frank?
I don't hear you. If you're addressing me, I don't hear you.
Do you have any further comments?
No, I don't have any further comments, but I really think could be a potential liability.
Well, I raised my hand to speak on this too. Could I speak after him or?
Go ahead right now. He's done with his
Okay, go ahead,
comments.
man.
Okay, well.
Go ahead, Fran.
I think I muted her. Can you guys unmute yourself? I'm not sure which one. You have two people on there, so you should be able to.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, it seems like the barriers are too close to 193. When you're coming out of Oak Tree Lane, you can hardly see past the barriers. I think the barriers could be pushed back a little bit. I think that would really help the situation. That's what I wanted to add to that. There's 1
Thank you.
mile between Ferrari Ranch and Oak Tree Lane. And there's a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign still there, like I mentioned before. I really think you need to take that 55-mile speed limit sign down because it's 1 mile and there's a church and a school there. Okay, that's what we wanted to add tonight. I think the barriers could be pushed back and that would help the situation.
You know, it's a serious liability issue, I think, for the city. That setup has to be, dealt with. And I don't know what the plan is. When you guys going to put in that light, but it's imperative that that light be installed as soon as possible. And the
Thank
people
you.
need to slow down coming to that intersection. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does the assistant city manager want to cover?
Okay, we still have an hour, 1 minute here. I was going to also mention that, everybody's watching the playgrounds being made over at the 12 Bridges High School. And everybody's saying, oh, that must be parking. There must be parking on the side of the playgrounds. And of course, we're saying, no, that's not parking. It's not parking. And it seems irresponsible to be putting in 2 new playgrounds, a snack bar, and no extra parking. And the cardboard recycling is still taking up 30 spaces. So, I wish you could do something about that. Maybe even if you had aggregate on the ground to move the cardboard recycling. And I'm sorry we missed the first part of this. I was trying to help Frank, and we were trying to do it on different devices, so we came late. So thank you for letting us speak.
Thank you for your comments.
So just address those in reverse order, that we do have a plan in place for the cardboard recycling, that it is in progress. It's just taking a little time to get completed, as things do for the city, but it is in place to move those cardboard receptacles and move the parking space and open back up the parking spaces. And then I was going to toss it to our traffic engineer to talk about that intersection.
Right. As far as State Route 193 and Oak Tree Lane, construction is underway right now. We are trying to, to install the signals and build an intersection as quickly as possible. Now, before that can happen, there's a lot of underground, major storm drain and infrastructure that needs to go in first. I'll follow up with our construction manager to get a more detailed timeline, but our expectation is it could last into our next construction season next year. But I've heard all the concerns. I will, take a look at what we can do in the interim as far as the current conditions during construction. In fact, I drove that portion of 193 a couple of weeks ago. I am very concerned about, the speeds. It's posted for 55. Unfortunately, I think people go a lot faster than that. And we are going to try to see, I am going to see what we can do to try to slow things down as they approach the city. In fact, I've directed Roland, our senior engineer, to look at possibly stepping that down from a 55 mile to a 45 mile to a 35 mile per hour zone. But unfortunately, that does take a little bit of time because we have to make sure, it's appropriate laid out and it's consistent with state law. But we are working on something to address that right now.
So I don't think that needs to be anything substantial. I think you just declare it a construction zone.
Yeah.
You put out
Right,
all the
right.
usual markers of the reduction of
Right.
speed.
Throw
Wow.
up whatever, I mean, if we want to throw it up as the 35 mile construction.
I would drop to 35, but you're right to step it down,
Right,
right?
right.
That's as you
Yeah.
approach.
Can we do that, Christine?
Right.
Would you?
No, I just want to make sure we weren't going to be, doing something that we shouldn't have done.
Oh,
All
no.
right, okay.
Mr. K is certainly capable of reviewing the safety at this section of the city and doing appropriate postings. The only other thing we might want to consider is we do have a changeable message sign that we may want to consider putting out there saying, caution, reduce your speed, construction, low visibility, or whatever the concerns are that
Like the
residents
one
have
that's
raised.
over for the stop sign on Fifth Street that's going in. That sign, I saw that sign coming here.
That's why they're movable. We can move them to where they're needed in the city.
Well, and just to Fran's other point, other than our recyclable boxes in the library parking lot, the construction is the school, right? That's not us, so,
That's
yeah.
correct.
So,
That's under the school's
That's under the
purview,
school
and
purview.
we can't
Mhm.
really,
yeah, we don't
We
tell
don't
them
ha-
what to build
we
and they don't
keep
tell us
out-
what to build. Right.
exactly.
Okay. I will then close public comment for the second time. And we had no public wanting to pull something on the consent calendar.
No,
So
no
I
other
will
hands.
entertain a motion. Up the consent agenda.
I moved to accept all that item.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta?
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner?
Yes.
And Mayor Carlskint?
Yes. Next is item 9A, which is continued to a date certain. 9B,
You want to read the date certain so that people can know? And I assume nobody was here that wanted to speak on that item, correct?
I'll go ahead and read it, Mayor. So the item 9A that's continued date certain to August 27th, 2024. Council will conduct a public hearing on the appeal by AT&T. Consider adoption of a resolution denying the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's denial of AT&T's mobility conditional use permit to co-locate their facilities at an existing Verizon wireless facility and determine the project to be exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15270A, because CEQA does not apply to projects which a public agency disapproves. Again, that will be continued to August 27, 2024.
Next item on the agenda is conduct a public hearing and adopt resolution 2024-148, approving changes to the City of Lincoln master fee schedule for user and regulatory fees.
Thank you. So as you said, this is the annual update of the master fee schedule, and we are continuing our once-a-year update of this fee schedule for the Consumer Price Index. And this year, the increase is 3.67%. You'll notice that some of the fees are changing by a very marginal amount. Some fees are actually not changing at all. I see the mayor laughing at me because one of the fees changed $1. There were a few that changed $1. But it is important that even if the increments are small, that we keep in the routine of bringing this before this council annually to ensure that the fees are updated and keep pace with the cost of doing business. And just a reminder for this council that we will be undertaking a complete study of the master fee schedule and the cost allocation in the next fiscal year.
Any questions, comments? Any questions from the public?
No hands are raised, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much.
Motion to approve the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second.
Thank you. Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
and Mayor Carl Skint.
Yes. 9C. Conduct a public hearing and determine if the proposed amendments qualify for statutory exemption under section 2108.17 of the California Public Resource Code and is thereby exempt from further environmental rule under CEQA guidelines section 1582H. CEQA does not apply to the adoption of an ordinance by a city to implement provisions of sections 66.852.2 and 65.852.22 of the California Government Code state, which are the state ADU laws. Adopt ordinance amending our municipal code, second dwelling residential units. Efren?
Yes. Good evening, City Council. Efren Sanchez, Senior Planner with Community Development Department. The item we have before you is the adoption of the accessory dwelling unit ADU ordinance to comply with state law. Currently, our zoning code is out of compliance with state ADU laws. State views that as a partial solution to California's affordable housing crisis. The partial solution is to adopt ADU ordinances and have streamlined the process for ADUs. So Cascadia Partners helped us draft an ADU ordinance as part of the REAP 1 grant. In April, the Planning Commission held a public workshop to discuss the proposed amendments. And in May, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and recommended that the City Council adopt the ADU ordinance. So you might be wondering, what is an accessory dwelling unit? Well, an accessory dwelling unit is a permanent independent unit accessory to the primary residence. It has separate living, cooking, and bathroom facilities for one or more persons. It was previously known as secondary dwelling units, granny flats, in-law units, or backyard cottages. ADUs are allowed as either new construction or conversion of existing permitted space and can be constructed on any residential lot. There are three main types of ADUs. You have detached ADUs, which is a separate structure from the primary dwelling. You have attached ADUs, which is connected to the primary dwelling and shares a common wall. And you have converted ADUs, such as garage conversions or accessory structures that is retrofitted into an ADU. So these illustrations are just example of the different types of ADUs. JADUs are no more than 500 square feet in size and contained within the single-family dwelling. They provide for independent living, sleeping, eating, and cooking, but may share a bathroom with the primary residence. JADUs require owner occupancy in either the JADU or the primary dwelling. Per state law, cities and counties cannot require additional parking. So this illustration here, you can see that on a given property, you can have the existing primary residence that's already there constructed. And let's say you want to add a JADU. So that JADU, you can be no more than 500 square feet in size, and you can convert your existing master bedroom into a JADU. And then you'll have the JADU, the primary dwelling, and you could also have an additional detached ADU in the backyard as well. And so this is a similar example where you have a part of the house that's no more than 500 square feet in size, and it's currently contained within the existing primary dwellings. So it's just a slight more distinction than the ADUs itself. The draft ADU ordinance provides a universal name change from secondary dwelling units to ADUs. It adds definitions to Title 18 for ADU terminology. 3, it clarifies where ADUs are allowed. It reduces the maximum ADU review time from 120 days down to 60 days. And also addresses fire sprinkler requirements. The draft ADU ordinance adds general zoning and building requirements such as siting, sizing, maximum number of ADUs permitted on each lot, owner occupancy for JADUs, and specifies the sale and rental of units. And it goes over deed restrictions as well. No additional off-street parking spaces are required for an ADU or a JADU as prescribed by state law. The draft ordinance also adds objective standards for architectural styles of ADUs to help take the burden off of staff having to make a judgment call to determine if the architectural style is consistent with in a given neighborhood. 9, no impact fees for ADUs less than 750 square feet. And also addresses the requirements regarding utilities as well. Well, that leads us to our recommendations. Staff recommends that the City Council conduct a public hearing, consider the information contained in the staff report and testimony of the public, and take the following action. Determine that the proposed amendments qualify for a statutory exemption. Adopt an ordinance to amend the Lincoln Municipal Code to comply with state law regarding ADUs in the City of Lincoln. So that concludes my presentation. If the City Council has any questions, please let me know.
I just have one. One thing I've been confused about on these ADU things is that, so we know what the state law, they have the right to build them on their lot. Do they still have to come get a permit from the city?
Correct.
Or, okay, so they still have to do all of that? They can't just erect it without telling us?
Yes.
Okay.
So a lot of times, like before, the state kind of like regulated ADUs across the state. A lot of different jurisdictions had different requirements, such as like doing a sort of a discretionary process of like getting an ADU permitted, going through the planning process, and then getting the permission to submit building permits. But now the state's like, no, we know we're in a housing crisis. We need to prioritize the construction of ADUs. So let's make it streamlined for everyone throughout California. So they issued their state law, we can't be more restricted than state law. So, but a lot of jurisdictions have the option of adopting an ADU ordinance to just add a little bit more flexibility.
The obvious question, I'm sure that the Planning Commission asked it, I wasn't able to watch that meeting. We have a lot of HOAs in the city of Lincoln that have restrictions that exceed this.
Yes.
I assume that this state law.
Yeah, that's
Law
correct.
supersedes
There's
HOA.
there's an exact statute that superseded HOA restrictions and CC&Rs. They thought about that.
Oh, I figured they thought about it. It's, You know what, I'll hold off on the rest. I don't have any questions, but I have real concerns. I recognize that we have to come in line with state law on this, but wow,
Yes.
Whole different thing, huh?
it's more than a whole different thing. It is, quite frankly, in my opinion, one more step towards the state taking over land use authority for local
100%.
jurisdictions.
I don't like it, but.
Well, it's one of many steps that they're taking. And we can't fight it from this podium. We can fight it if we want to through other agencies like big cities and
Yeah, well, that's not always helpful either,
Yeah.
so, but I get your point.
You know,
yeah.
No, the league is supportive of this.
yeah,
It's,
I did have one question, and that just had to do with sprinklers for ADUs.
Yep.
What's,
if it's not required for the house, it's not required for the ADU.
okay,
That's correct.
that makes sense. Okay. Any comments or questions?
Public hearing.
Open, yeah. I'll open the public hearing on this item. Any testimony from the public? Any
No hands
online?
are raised online, Mayor.
Okay, no public input. Close the public hearing. Bring it back for a vote.
Yeah, so real quick, just so that the public knows what's going on here and adding additional housing for folks, affordable housing is a good thing. But what this does, and I think, I didn't see it in here, but I think it actually, the state is allowing 2 auxiliary dwelling units now.
Some jurisdictions allow 2, but we're allowing a JADU, which has to be attached, and then a detached. So you can't just have 2 separate
So you can have one
detached in your
attached and
backyard.
one detached.
Correct, correct,
And the detached setback is 4 feet,
correct.
which is closer than I'm allowed to plant a tree in my
Right.
backyard to the
Right.
fence.
They're just trying to grease the wheels on allowing, take away barriers so that people can more readily build ADUs.
Sure.
If they want to build an ADU. You don't have to build an ADU, but if you want to,
Understood.
they're
And-
forcing
and-
us to accommodate them.
And the attached has to be a family member, but the detached can be a rental property.
I don't believe that is the case.
think it is.
There's
Owner
owner
occup-
occupancy
Occupancy
requirement.
for JADUs, or either in the JADU or the existing primary dwelling.
The primary dwelling has to be occupied by
Right.
the owner, but the
Right.
JADU could be rented.
The J,
Yeah,
so that's the attached, right?
Right.
The other, that could be standalone in the
The
backyard,
detached,
4 feet away from the fence.
There is no, we're not allowed to have an owner occupancy requirement.
Right, so it could be a renter.
Correct.
That was my point. We're not allowed to charge any additional fees for the impacts on sewer, water, any of the rest of that. Although there are clear impacts that hadn't been planned for.
For units under 750
Yeah.
square feet, we
Seven hundred and
cannot,
fifty square feet is
Still a
not
lot.
small
right?
at all. It's bigger than most apartments.
Yeah.
So this is just one more of those things where the intent is good, but the impacts on the local communities are, well, you've used the word bypassed, right? The state is trying to bypass a lot of this control. So you showed an image of one potential attached being a second story above a garage. How far does that go? I've got a 2-story house. Can I put a 3rd floor on that house?
as long as it's not over 50
Can't
feet.
go over the height
500
restrictions of
feet.
the zone, so there's still some limitations on the site planning, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to conform to that, so. And in terms of impacts, it's not like everyone has to do, it's like, it's kind of an increment, very small. People choose to do it, they choose not to do it, but yeah, there's I don't see it as a tidal wave of impact, you know.
I don't either. I don't see it as a tidal wave of impact, but I see it as a incremental clawback of land use authority, local land use authority. And that's where my greatest concern lies, quite frankly. But once
Right,
again,
well-
we are in a position where we have no choice but to come into compliance with state law.
And
You know,
when we plan for neighborhoods to be, low density or mid density or high density, this takes away that completely. And you have no control over, if it's someone moves into an area because they like how non-dense or dense it might be, how do you, that's why I'm super against it as well. I mean, that's just one more thing for me, yeah.
One of the elements that surprised me is that in a mixed-use environment, you can add an auxiliary dwelling unit. So you could conceivably you could conceivably downtown have your business. And as long as you're apparently not exceeding the height restrictions, add a second floor as an ADU.
wow. Isn't that kind of where we're headed anyway?
But in a
Isn't that
very,
our design?
but in a very planned and intentional way.
right.
This gets around that planned and intentional way.
Correct.
And the impact, we're beyond the scope, but impacts, I think the greater impact is parking. Much more than, you don't know, we say the average home uses so many gallons of water, so many gallons of waste flow. And that's predicated on a number of people. Well, is there an impact if you only have one person in the house and you add a person in an ADU? Probably not, and most certainly not. Because your impact fees were based on a residential unit of 3.5 people, or 5, whatever it is. So and you clearly get impact fees if it's new construction. Okay, because you can then put meters and billing on each unit.
The new construction is planned from the beginning to have that ADU.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of it is, there's a lot of, in other areas other than ours, although I think some of the new stuff's gonna happen, there are a lot of planned areas in Roseville, for instance, that you get an ADU as an option.
We have an area like that.
As in Sun City, Lincoln Hills, a casita. Actually, it isn't because they don't allow cooking, but other than that, it is an ADU, a JDU. Anyway,
Well, that becomes an interesting question. If there is an existing ADU that doesn't currently allow cooking, this negates that and they can put in a kitchen.
Just get a building permit to retrofit that existing casita and make it an ADU.
Interesting.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
I don't know if it helps, but every year during our annual progress report, we take a snapshot of the calendar year of how many building permits were issued. And in the past calendar year in 2023, we've only had roughly around 5 ADUs that were permitted. So it's an incremental change, like I don't see this overnight, just like, oh, everyone's applying for an ADU. Because they are expensive too, they're cost prohibitive as well.
Chief, from the fire perspective, any concern about that 4-foot setback for a structure?
I don't know off the top of my head. I could speak with Chief Mejia, who's a little more.
Can't do
experienced.
anything about it, but
Oh,
I
right.
would think that would be very concerning. Your firefighters
Right.
may have to get into a 4-foot space between a fence and a structure. That seems very dangerous.
Yeah.
All right, I'll be quiet.
We did already, yep.
Okay.
And you
I'll
already-
accept
And you
the
already
vote.
closed it, yeah.
I
I
guess
move
in line with
approval
the
of,
state.
yeah, I move approval of item 9C.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Andriotta.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah.
Councilmember Joyner
Yes.
and Mayor Carlskint.
Yeah.
Moving on.
9D. Conduct a public hearing and adopt resolution 2024-149, authorizing the execution and delivery of an equipment lease purchase agreement.
Good evening again. So this item is the continuation of the city's project for energy efficiency. So as a reminder, on May 28th, we presented to this council the three options available to finance the project, which included lease revenue bonds, a bank loan, or a loan to the California Infrastructure Development Bank.
Sorry.
No problem.
Not you. It's online.
Jamie, we were getting some interference, so I muted you while Nita does her staff report.
Okay, and assisting me tonight in this presentation is the city's municipal financing advisor, Jamie Trujillo with PFM. But just continuing on, after we received direction from council, we issued an RFP to solicit offers from private banks to determine the best route going forward. And that's the item that we're bringing for you this evening, is the proposal by Bank of America to provide financing for this project. And with that, I will turn it over briefly to, I said Jamie, I meant Jaime earlier, I apologize for that, to Jaime Trujillo.
Good evening. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, excellent. Jaime Trujillo, PFM Financial Advisors. Good evening. Thank you for giving me time to present tonight. This is a continuation of a prior item. The city is looking to install some energy efficient projects around the city. We worked with the city to issue an RFP with Piper Sandler, the city's placement agent. We received multiple bids from three banks. Bank of America provided the lowest cost of capital, and a couple, there's some flexibility in terms of the refunding. We chose to go with Bank of America. One important item for this financing is, the tax money that will be received from the Inflation Reduction Act for the solar project. Bank of America allowed in redemption that's favorable, so we can save on interest cost for the financing. So the numbers you see before you are what Bank of America proposed. The loan is about $11.7 million. Total repayment will be about $17.9 million, and annual debt service about $944,000. Those numbers will decrease once we receive the money from the federal government and we make the prepayment. We expect to receive about $2.4 million. That will be prepaid around February 1st, 2026. That will reduce the overall interest and the overall debt service from the $17.9 million to about $14.7 million, and overall debt service from $944,000 to about $735,000. On top of that, we structure the financing so that we have savings in just about every year of the project. And what I mean about savings, so we're taking savings from the work orders, so the total program savings, and we're going to net out the solar O&M cost with SiteLogic and the lease payments, and the net will be a savings to the city. Those savings are about $1.7 million that we estimate based off the information provided by SiteLogic and the work orders 1 and 2 that would be approved in a subsequent item. that concludes the presentation. Open to questions.
Of course, I would ask the mayor to open the public hearing when he is ready and that we're happy.
Any comments before I open public hearing? Questions?
Oh, go ahead, do that first.
Open public hearing on this item. Anyone in the public wishing to make testimony? Check online.
No hands are raised, Mayor.
Close public hearing. Bring it back to the council. Comments, questions?
No questions. This is a continuation of something that we've been moving towards for a very long time. I do want to commend staff on the depth of the staff report. It was really helpful for me, a little dry, but very helpful. I appreciate it.
I'll give all the credit to Jaime for that one.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the hard work on this and really excited about the project. I'm just curious, and maybe I'm not informed on, financial institutions. Is there a reason why bank is spelled with the C, or is that just a typo? Like, is it a different Bank of America? Or is it
Different
just a-
Bank of America.
The different
trying
Bank
to
of America.
piggyback.
Okay, thank you. I was like, that's kind of confusing.
It's a very,
Yes.
it's actually a very common question that
Yes.
when you see Bank of America, the Bonk of America with
Yeah.
the C versus
Yes.
Bank of America with the K.
Yes.
It's a very common question.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I figured it was because of the rest of the name, Public Capital Corp. That's good. I'm not a fan of Bank of America anyway, so that's good. Yeah.
I'd rather doubt that's accidental.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah. Thank you for my, answering my question. I knew it was a dumb question, but I'm like, I just need to ask because I don't know.
It was not dumb.
It's a more international name.
Yes, that's what I figured. Yeah.
Okay, no further questions, comments? Thank you for the presentation, both of you,
Yeah, thank you.
and I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution 2024-149.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
and Mayor Carlskint.
Yes. Now we go on to general business. Next item on the agenda is a resolution for authorizing a couple of work orders for SiteLogic.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the public, council. Tonight, it's Groundhog Day. We're talking about the same project again, following the public hearing that approved the funding.
Wait, what? Groundhog?
So this is the fifth time we're before you. And the presentation background will include kind of a very quick run through of kind of the progress we've made since last June. It'll describe the project locations as a refresher, and again, ask for a recommendation for project execution of the 2 work orders and the maintenance agreement. Back in March, we originally presented the project. In April, we had a public hearing, which actually identified our approved energy service company as SiteLogic, and we presented the preliminary project for approval May 28th. As Nita mentioned earlier, we presented the 3 financing options, and earlier tonight, we approved the funding, or your council approved the funding.
Earlier tonight, you mean?
Yeah, early.
Like 3 minutes
Much
ago?
earlier tonight.
Yeah.
So back on April 9th, if you recall, we presented the 2 work orders and the project costs, and those costs have actually remained the same. What you authorized the city manager to enter the agreement, but we did not approve the 2 work orders pending funding approval. And much earlier tonight, that funding approval was provided. And again, the locations are here at City Hall. We have 4 arrays planned. At the community center, we have 1 large array out in the parking area. At the community center, we also have HVAC units being replaced there, which are much needed, especially during this heat wave. At the Corporation Yard, we have 2 arrays planned. At the McBean Park, you're aware, we have the A-frame structure that will provide a cover for the pickleball courts and lighting At the police department, we have an array and we're replacing an HVAC unit there. And at the airport, or you could say the lot north of the courtyard, out at the end of Flightline Drive, we have the ground mount system. So tonight, we recommend that you adopt resolution 2024-150, authorizing the city manager to execute work order number 1 and work order number 2 for a total of $11,050,000 and the operations and maintenance agreement with SiteLogic. And that has a first-year cost of $48,750. And that is for a 10-year term. And the reason for the 10-year term is that's the maximum allowable term allowed by state law. So we would likely, if they performed, we'd extend that agreement. But at this time, we're asking for that agreement, which includes a performance guarantee as provided in the maintenance agreement. And I do have Jessica Ritter and Taylor Boyle on Zoom, I believe, if there's any additional project questions, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Are there any questions?
The only question I have, when I think you guys answered this before, the cover on the pickleball courts does include lights, correct?
It does.
On the maintenance side of it, you said 10 years. I know that when I ended up getting mine, I ended up getting 25 years, but the state only says 10 for what we're doing?
Jessica, are you on the call? Could you answer that question for me?
Apologies, Councilman. I can barely hear the microphones from the council members. If you could please repeat your question. I believe it had to do with the O&M agreement.
Yes, it was in regards to the 10-year term and
Great.
why that's the maximum allowable term length.
Yeah, it actually has a lot to do with our own insurance providers. So they look at that as a liability, long-term liability for our corporation. So they want us to also limit it to 10 years. We, of course, want to be your O&M provider for as long as you'd like us to be, 10, 20, 25 years. Your system will last well beyond its expected useful life. But that is among many reasons why we have to keep it to 10.
Okay. My comment was just that when I got mine, I ended up with a 25-year O&M with my personal. But thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, any other comments? Questions?
Nope.
Turn it to the public. Anyone in the public have a comment?
We do have folks online, but no hands are raised.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll bring it back for vote. I do want to say that if you look at this expenditure, that dumping on the technology and the efficiency to go from March to here, that's at warp speed for a city. And staff is to really be congratulated. I don't know what lit the fire under them, and I'd like to know what it was so we can continue to keep it.
Duplicate it? Oh.
But it really is phenomenal. Just
Yeah,
less than 6
good point.
months.
I'll say that the credit for the speed of this project is entirely due to Matt Medill, that he has been the driving force behind this and keeping this all on task and on timeline and making sure that we have been moving as quickly, as you said, at light speed.
And I cannot take full credit because we wouldn't have a project without the funding, so.
You're welcome.
We can't put the cart before the horse, so thank you,
You're very
Nita.
humble. Thanks, Matt.
No, this is great. This is going to be a really great project. It's going to be good for the city. Very excited about this. So I will, if you have something else, Mayor, I'll move approval of Resolution 2024-150.
Thank you. Councilmember Andriotta?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner?
Yes.
And Mayor Carl Skint.
Yes. It's nice to be in control, isn't it, Matt?
Yes.
He's got a smile every time he talks about this program,
Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
unlike some other ones.
The best.
Appreciate it.
The best.
Now comes actually building the project.
Yeah, there you go. Now let's see if you stay on time with that, right?
You like speed too?
Okay, the next item on the agenda is that we receive a presentation and information on our unfunded accrued liability, and hopefully provide some general direction to staff on the preferred method of addressing it, and wearing a different hat than Assistant City Manager Nito will take this.
Thank you. So, and I am, sorry, I'm trying to get to the right page. I do have online with me Roy with NHA Advisors to actually provide a presentation and an overview of the city's UAL. And I think I'm going to start it off by kicking it to him for this presentation, and then we'll provide additional information, answer questions, of course. Roy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And I believe you have control of the screen.
Perfect. Are the presentation slides online?
Yes. we can see
Great. Okay, great. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. It's great to be with you all this evening. Tonight, we'll be walking through the topic of the city's unfunded pension liability with CalPERS. The unfunded liability is a challenge that is familiar to many public agencies across the state. We'll be looking into the city's specific situation and some of the potential strategies for managing these costs. So to start with some background information, the city has a reported $32.6 million unfunded accrued liability, or as we'll call it, the UAL, with CalPERS as of the most recent reported valuations. So this has increased from about $17 million from the prior year, largely due to weak CalPERS investment performance. The UAL balance is expected to increase slightly to above 33 million once the newest valuation reports do come out this summer. And this is based on CalPERS just missing their investment target of 6.8% last year when they earned 6.1%. So as a result of the increasing UAL balance, the city will be projected to face higher UAL payments moving forward, with these payments increasing starting in the current fiscal year 25 and upcoming 2026. So we'll be looking into some strategies for how the city can manage these increasing costs, but we'll first dive into how these costs have come about. So to start, we'll talk about the two payments that the city does make annually to CalPERS. The first is what's called the normal cost. So this represents the annual cost of service for current employees. And the second, which relates to the topic of this presentation, is for the UAL. So the UAL really represents the gap between the amount of pension assets that the city needs with CalPERS to meet out future benefit obligations and the level where those are currently at. And so that shortfall, in this case, about 32.6 million, represents a debt that the city owes to CalPERS to make up the difference. So this debt is currently being assessed at about 6.8%. So it is pretty pricey. And unlike other forms of debt, it does have some unique characteristics, which we'll talk about shortly.
Roy, I just wanted to interrupt you for just a second. If you could go back to that slide. I wanted to make sure that it's clear to the council and to those listening at home that the city's UAL, we are paying interest on that it is a debt that the city owes to PERS, and for every dollar that is owed, there is an interest component. And right now it's being charged at 6.8%. Sorry, Roy, go ahead.
No problem. So just to talk about the UAL further, really the UAL balance is structured as almost like a cake of different layers. So each layer is called an amortization base. So if you were to look into a CalPERS report, you would see a bunch of different layers, which are effectively different forms of debt for each year that the CalPERS makes an adjustment to the report. So to kind of illustrate the concept here, we have a chart showing a bunch of different bars. And so what these really show are the idea that each individual payment layer can have its own unique size, shape, and payment term. And so these can be what are called positive bases, which occur when CalPERS may have an underperformance or make an assumption change and increase the UAL. So that'll be tacked on as new UAL debt. And conversely, if CalPERS were to have a strong performance here, that might actually reduce the UAL in the form of a negative base. So you can see in the charts, we have a bunch of different colors here, but the red line kind of highlights the the net payments that we made, including all the offsetting bases. And so effectively, that's why you'll see a shape that's increasing, kind of plateauing, and then decreasing over time. That's a very common shape that many agencies are currently facing right now, and we'll show that in the context of the city's payments very shortly. But just for some additional details on how we have gotten to the situation with the UAL balances, we kind of have to look back in time to the late 1990s. Back then, the situation was such that many pension plans were fully funded or even super funded based on robust investment returns during the dot-com era. And so during that period, there were widespread benefit enhancements that were enacted, which were considered sustainable under the assumption that CalPERS would continue to meet higher return requirements. However, as we've seen over time with various recessions, those investment return assumptions have not quite held. And so because of that, CalPERS has been forced to make a number of different assumption changes over the years, largely including the change to their target rate of return, which is called the discount rate. So previously, they were assuming that an 8.25% discount rate was attainable as a long-term investment return rate. That has dwindled down over the years to now 6.8%. So they are currently assuming that they are going to meet a 6.8% rate of return, but that will also increase correspondingly the burden of the UAL that is placed on member agencies. So just for some additional color there, this chart really goes to show kind of the balance of how retirement benefits can be funded. These are general figures, so each individual member agency may have a different situation, but generally speaking, there are three forms of contributions that fund retirement benefits. These are employee contributions, also contributions from employers, and also contributions from investment earnings made by CalPERS. Historically, we've seen that investment earnings make up the lion's share of the responsibility of funding these benefits. So to the extent that CalPERS meets, exceeds, or doesn't meet their target rate of return, that will have a relatively outsized impact on how that changes the UL balances moving forward. And for some additional context, this is just showing how CalPERS has performed over the years in relation to their target rate of return. So the orange line really shows their discount rate. So that is starting at 8.25% and now dropping down to 6.8%. But we can see in the bars that represents their annual rate of return, and that has shown a lot of volatility over the years. So we can see that, while there's some years where they're overperforming against their target, there's some years where they're underperforming. And overall, in the past 5 years, their average return has been under their target rate of return, which has contributed to rising UAL balances. So getting into the city's specific plans and what these costs really look like, we'll first talk about the city's plans. The city does have two main pension plans with CalPERS. These are the miscellaneous plan and the safety plan. Collectively, there are about 500 covered members. One thing to note is that in 2013, the PEPR legislation did go into effect, which moving forward does help manage long-term pension costs for new employees. However, the caveat there is that about 97% of the city's current UL does relate to the classic employees and has not been retroactively reduced by PEPRA. So getting into what this all really means for the city's pension costs, here we have a chart of the historical payments the city has made on its UAL and the projected payments. So we can see historically in the lighter blue bars, back in 2018, the city was making an annual payment of around 1.2, 1.3 million. And by 2024, that had almost doubled to about 2.2 million. And based on CalPERS underperforming in recent years, it is currently projected that these payment levels will increase through the end of the decade to potentially a $3.5 million level. And so we can see that these payments are rapidly increasing, but in the back end, we can see that they're starting to plateau and fall off. So this sort of peaking payment shape is very common across several member agencies across the state, and it is contributing to budgetary pressure that many agencies are having to manage and look forward to proactively. And just for a more complete picture, this is a chart showing what the city's payments are if you include the normal costs. These are typically a bit more stable as they're growing relative to the payroll. But we can see in total, the city is paying about $4.6 million as of last year. And that is going to project to grow to above $6 million by the end of the decade. So with that being said, we can now start looking into some potential strategies that can be considered by member agencies to address the UAL. I'd like to first highlight that these strategies are not mutually exclusive, so any of these can be considered in conjunction with each other. So the first option that many public agencies do take advantage of is prepaying the annual UAL payment earlier in the fiscal year, particularly in July. So CalPERS does offer member agencies about a 3.3% discount for making a lump sum payments of their annual UAL payment early on instead of on a monthly basis. So for agencies that are able to do this, they are able to see a healthy discount and benefit from doing so. Another option that each agency can consider is negotiating cost sharing with employees. The third option is one that is offered by CalPERS, and that is effectively reducing the current payment shape into a shorter period of time. This is called the Fresh Start. So the intended benefit is to reduce the overall interest paid. In a way, this is shortening a mortgage from a 30-year to a 20-year payment schedule. But the downside is in the near term, your payments will be higher. One additional consideration here is that when you do a Fresh Start, these payments are locked in. So it would not be possible to retroactively undo the Fresh Start in the future if that was desired. So this is typically an option that is considered by fewer agencies. Some will do it if it meets their specific objectives. Option 4 here is one that we'll look at more closely in this presentation. And this is relating to what are some strategies if you have available cash reserves on hand to proactively address the UAL. So at a high level here, we'll talk about what's one thing is called the Section 115 trust. So this is a separate trust that can be funded to pay down pension and OPEB costs. And another option is to directly send money to CalPERS. This is called an additional discretionary payment, or ADP, and we'll walk through those in more detail shortly. One last option that we'll touch on here is restructuring a portion of the UAL, which is typically done through a pension obligation bond. So back in the early 2020s, when interest rates were lower, this was a more popular option, given that this is a strategy that is more sensitive to where interest rates are at in the market. So in the current environment, rates are a bit higher than they were in the past. Additionally, there are various pros and cons that need to be weighed when evaluating a pension bond, but it is an option that can be considered under the right market conditions. So as noted, we're going to be looking at the two options shown in option 4, which are what you can do if you have additional cash on hand. So the first one, which we call the ADP, is really making additional payments to CalPERS above and beyond the annual required payment. So effectively, this is just paying down your debt early to CalPERS. And like paying down any debt, the benefit of that is that, one, you have less debt on your books, so in this case, you have a higher funding ratio with CalPERS. It does reduce your future payments because you are paying down some of that debt. However, when you do send money to CalPERS, you would not be able to claw that back retroactively in the event that was desired. So that is one thing to consider when thinking about doing an ADP. Additionally, those funds would be managed by CalPERS, so that is one thing to consider as well. The other option, if perhaps you didn't want to send money direct to CalPERS, is setting up a restricted account for pension and or OPEB costs. One of the more common vehicles for this is called a Section 115 trust. And so the main benefit of a Section 115 trust is that it does provide access to potentially higher longer term investment returns in a managed account with the trust administrator. So this can be a benefit if the city would be able to potentially access returns that it may not be able to due to related to funds that may otherwise be restricted to LAIF. Additionally, because this trust is managed by the city, it does have the flexibility in governing how it wants to use these funds. So it can choose to continue funding with additional withdrawals, and also it can make additional withdrawals in the future. So there is a lot of flexibility on how the trust can be utilized. Some of the other things to consider is that because any funds that go into a trust are not going to CalPERS directly, that doesn't reduce the UAL or increase your funding ratios until the time when any funds are sent to CalPERS. And so just to highlight the two options in a simplified table, really with CalPERS, you are sending money directly to CalPERS. With the ADP approach in 115 Trust, you are holding on to those funds, but you do have the flexibility to leverage those funds as you see fit. One assumption that you'll see in the following slides is that we'll do a comparison of these two approaches. Oftentimes, we have seen that many public agencies do opt for a more moderate to moderately conservative portfolio with these 115 trusts. It is up to each individual agency, but we've typically seen that for those options, the expected returns on those are typically lower than what CalPERS assumes with its 6.8% discount rate. So just to kind of show what this could really look like if you were to consider both approaches from the city's perspective, here is really a chart showing, in the event that the city were to apply a certain amount of funds. In this case, we are assuming about $4 million is contributed over the next couple of years to either fund up a 115 trust or pay down the UL debt directly. Really the lines show what the potential impacts would be to the city's UL payment schedule. So starting with the green line, this is what is shown after the city does make ADPs to CalPERS. So because you are making direct payments to pay down the debt, your future payments will be lowered. But as you can see, the payment shape also mimics the current payment shape of the UAL. So this kind of relates to that CalPERS has a bunch of different layers that make up each of the total components of the UAL. So when you're paying down one layer or one piece, the other pieces remain outstanding. So there is some more limited flexibility on how you can manage the savings in the ADP approach. But as you can see in the green text box, in the long term, we are assuming that this will create more savings overall. In the orange line, we can see this is what an approach would look like if you were to fund a 115 trust and in the years with higher peaking payments. So for example, starting in 2028, if the city were to start making withdrawals on the trust and this effectively offset some of those higher payments, the city would have the flexibility to manufacture a payment level that it may be comfortable with. So that's why we can see that it has more ability with this approach to structure more level payments and effectively concentrate those savings during those peak and payment years. Of course, because we are assuming that the interest rate benefit on the 115 trust may not be as high as with CalPERS, the total overall savings here are projected to be a bit lower, but really the main benefit is with the 115 trust on a relative basis is being able to concentrate those savings where it may be desired. So this is really a summary of the previous slide, just putting some numbers to paper, just kind of highlighting some of the assumptions. And again, really, this is just a comparison of flexibility versus maximizing return on investment. And again, I'd like to highlight that both of these options are not mutually exclusive. It is possible to both set up a 115 trust and also consider implementing ADPs as part of a pension funding strategy. Many agencies we do work with do consider both approaches. And so, these are not mutually exclusive again, but here we're just trying to illustrate some of the differences between both approaches.
Before you move on, the projected savings, is that annually or is that over the life of?
Yes, that's a great question. So that is over the life of the repayment term. So that'll be cumulative savings.
So stretching all the way out to 2045, the difference is $400,000.
Correct.
Thank you.
Of course. So one last thing we talked about before we can go to some takeaways. So one other approach with the 115 trust is instead of making withdrawals in the near term for cash flow considerations, if the city were comfortable making these payments, it could just allow the assets in the trust to grow over time, over the longer term. And so with similar assumptions, we can show here that for example, if the city were to keep assets in the trust, and if it were able to achieve, in this case, a 4.5% long-term rate of return, it could have the potential to completely pay off its UAL about 5 years sooner than is currently projected. So this is just showing the other bookend of, if you were to keep money in the trust and allow it to fully compound and grow over time, this is what another option could look like. So to conclude, really the main takeaway is that rising pension costs are a challenge of many public agencies and also the city. And these costs are increasing rapidly. In the city's case, over the next 10 years, these may increase by about 60% as we currently see it. So these are costs that will have to be managed and considered carefully. City's UAL is a moving target. So, it could be possible that, with a good year, the UAL balance may be reduced. But, currently, it's difficult to predict where CalPERS will go in the future. That being said, there are a variety of strategies that can be considered to manage costs. The good thing is that these are not mutually exclusive. So any of the strategies discussed can be considered in conjunction with each other. So with that, that concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I would also share with the council that we gave this presentation to the FIOC committee as well, and to get their assessment and recommendation. And they did concur with staff that we're recommending that the council consider and provide general direction to staff to open a 115 trust. But before we get there, I know you have questions, so we're happy to answer them.
I guess an area that is still a little foggy for me is how can both paths coexist? What does that look like?
So the city could open a Section 115 trust. So the savings that Roy demonstrated is assuming the city is able to make an additional $3.5 million payment into a 115 trust in year one, and then a second payment of $500,000 in year two. So assuming that we could then use that money from the trust to keep the UAL at a certain balance. We wouldn't be paying down the debt. We would be keeping the debt at a manageable level to try to keep it from impacting the budgets. At the same time, if the city had additional funds that it wanted to make an additional discretionary payment, an ADP, the city could do that. So the difference is the ADP pays down your debt. So it's kind of like, if you think about it, you're putting money in a savings account to make your mortgage payment in the future. And you could also additionally make that one payment every year to try to reduce the time your mortgage is existing for.
Thank you.
Did I understand right that we haven't really benefited from PEPRA very much because we have, most of our employees have been here a long time?
Yes, and that is true for most government agencies, that the PEPRA retirement plan is working as it is supposed to, but because the majority of your staff are classic members, everybody sitting in here is a classic member, that you don't see the benefit of that
We
until
just saw a
those
couple of
members
heads shake
retire.
no.
Oh, sorry, I take that back. You're not classic?
Don't rub it in.
We appreciate
Yeah.
that.
So there's a difference between classic and super classic, at
Jen,
least in
you
my
are
mind.
classic
Super
to me,
classic.
girlfriend.
Classic.
No, yeah.
So for example, I'm not a super classic member. I haven't been, I wasn't with the city when it had that 2.7% formula, but I am still considered a classic member where I get a more generous retirement formula than somebody who's in PEPRA. So it
And
is
that
when
because like maybe you and Ben, whatever, you can't, you just.
we were hired
you
after a
just-
certain date.
Wait, but you brought your retirement with you from where you came from before, no?
No, no,
Nope.
ma'am.
Okay.
Nope, the PERS formula, and this is a very good question and a very common misnomer.
Okay.
So the PERS formula is specific to the agency. It has nothing to do with the employee you hire. So for example, at my first PERS employer, I had 3% at 60. That is the best formula out there for a PERS retiree, and I left it. So, and since then, I've had formulas that are less generous than that one because the agencies that I worked for had those lower formulas. So we always go into the formula that exists in the agency that we're hired by. We're considered not super classic. Again, that's my term. Not super classic because this council and this city adopted a new formula, new retirement formula. I'm getting into HR's territory, so I wish he was here. But we adopted a new retirement formula after a date and certain, right? Everybody hired after that date goes into the new formula, unless they're PEPRA, then they go into PEPRA.
Okay, thanks.
If you, well, the performance, the graphs that we're showing, do they assume the application of the 115 funds as a ADP? In other words, do they get the benefit when you of a one-time early payment?
No, sir. So the funds that we would put into a 115 trust would merely be making the additional amount of the UAL. So the UAL is projected to go well above $3 million annually. Our annual lump sum payment is going to be well above $3 million. And what we will do is when that annual payment starts to grow past that $3 million mark is we would pull money out of the trust to pay the difference. That's all we're doing with the funds that would be in the trust.
Unless you decide to take the option and let the trust bill.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, if the city were able to afford it and not pull the money out of the trust, we could just leave it in there for decades well after we're all gone almost. I'm looking for somebody young in the room. Whitney will still be here.
Hey.
And Holly, of course.
I'm just kidding. I'm a lot older than Whitney. That's cool.
So if we were able to let it sit there for decades, then we could use it to pay down the UAL early.
But we can go ahead with the funding our UAL payment at the start of the fiscal year.
Yes, as we're doing now.
The 3% saving or whatever it is.
Yes, the city is taking advantage of that now. We make our UAL payment in a lump sum at the beginning of the fiscal year. So we plan to continue that. We plan to continue that process because it does save us some money. And if we don't, if we pay it throughout the year, there's a little interest that PERS charges us on the outstanding UAL.
Which is more than they were able to make themselves.
That's correct.
Interestingly enough.
Yes.
Before we get any further, no further questions?
Good.
Does anybody in the public in the building have questions? This is a PERS
Treasurer would
101.
like to comment.
He wants to comment, but I was holding a special place for him. Anybody online?
We do have a few folks. No hands are raised.
Okay, fine. Now I think
Is this going to be in your official capacity, Richard, or
This
as a
is-
citizen?
semi-official.
And I would just like to take this opportunity.
Don't stop talking to you to the mic, sir. You know better.
Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Ron Dolensek from our Fiscal Investment Oversight Committee. Ron joined us about 9 months ago, something like that, and his wife is with us also. I guess she couldn't just stand to be away and to want to see how much fun we had here. So with this proposal was brought to us at FIOC. We went through it very detailed. It was a very good discussion. We went through it. We wholeheartedly endorse it. We're talking about a lot of money over here. The big thing for us is that it provides flexibility. And so we approve it.
and we'll bring with staff, come back and we'll take it forward. So I think it's a worthwhile thing for us to do without a doubt. And I looked at where the money, we're talking about $3.5 million. Most of that, I think it's 1.8 is going to come from the general fund because that's where that's where the pension obligations are. But then the rest will be spread throughout all the other funds. It doesn't appear to be any problem in any funding the $3.5 million, with the exception of the airport, which of course has a negative balance at this point. But that's the only one that would have a problem. Everything else, I think, looks to be with no problem at all. So wholeheartedly endorse it. Thank you.
I'm going
I
to be
was
starting a bake
wondering
sale
why he
to
didn't
help
glaze over
supplement this.
in the audience. He looked like he understood. Well,
Ron is a very engaged member of FIAC, and I really appreciate having him on the committee. He asks good questions, he does good research, and so it's been very helpful to have him.
Glad to have you.
So for the moment, the airport only has one employee that it would have to.
That's
cover.
correct, yeah. And it does have a share as a,
we have no bad.
as a Treasurer Pearl pointed out, it does have a share of this 3.5. They have one full-time, well, they have one part-time employee. They also have a manager whose part of his wages are allocated there as well. So they do have a share that they would make to it. And even though that they have a very tight budget, we believe that they can manage this $67,000.
What portion of the airport manager's
Um,
cost?
I don't have it in my head, but I can get it for you.
The direction that you want, is it, because there were more than the 115 or ADP presented. You want direction just on whether you should or should not go forward with the 115? Or direction that you need to explore concurrently some of the other things.
I think that if this council would like to give us both directions, we will be happy to move forward with both, because I think that it's a reasonable avenue to pursue both, that we look at setting up a trust of this $3.5 million and getting maybe in year 1 and 2, that's all we do is we take care of the trust. But in year 3, we look at additional funds to make additional discretionary payments to PERS.
Right, or other methods of
Or other methods,
generating
correct.
funding.
And that timeline works for me.
That's what I was thinking.
I'm good with that.
Okay, what is the wish of the council?
So if I may, one of the nice things about this, and Richard will remember this, this was the boogeyman that lived over the horizon for the city of Lincoln and a lot of cities up and down the state. This was going to put us upside down in a few years. And to be in this position, to be able to comfortably make these tweaks to be able to address this is no small accomplishment. So really pleased to see it.
And if I remember right, the UAL that we were scared of was a lot less
It
than the
was.
UAL we're looking at
It
now.
was, yes.
Because nobody ever expected CalPERS to do as badly as, anyway, we didn't expect it to go that way.
You know, I really appreciate the forward thinking on this and the work put into this. And so I'm happy with the trust, and then whatever other methods you feel are the right way to go. I fully trust your judgment on that.
And we are trying to move this almost at the light speed of Matt Medill. I'm trying to, I can't let him outdo me.
Nope, there you go.
So we
Friendly
are bringing
competition.
back to FIAC advisors that could potentially manage a 115 trust for pension, and in short order, we'll be back before this body with the formation of a trust and appointment of an advisor.
Any sense of who that might be or what the position might be?
We are looking at the big three in the game. So really, actually, CalPERS has the most pension and OPEB trusts of anybody out there. I think PARS has the second, and Keenan is in third or fourth place. Yeah, so we are reviewing all three of those advisors.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
In other words, if PERS is the PERS people are operating with a little more flexibility, they do better?
The trust actually has in slightly different investment parameters than PERS does itself for its investments. The investments of PERS are really, really restricted. The trust that PERS has, their trust program, they're slightly different, but that is one of the questions that I'm sure FIAC will be asking them about.
Okay. Go to the next item. Receive a report on the registration program for STRs.
I'm tired, I'm sitting for
Sit
this
down,
one.
yeah.
So we just wanted to bring you information about a short-term program that we want to start to register and identify short-term rentals within the city. And this actually kind of dovetails nicely into the change in the Muni Code and the change in state law that prohibits ADUs and JADUs from operating as short-term rentals. It's our belief that within the city now, that we have a few short-term rentals that are being conducted with the use of an ADU or a JADU, and we want to reach out to those homeowners and start to educate them and get them in compliance with the state law. So that's part of it, reaching out to homeowners that actually can't have a short-term rental based on new law, and also reaching out to those homeowners that can have a short-term rental and do have one, and letting them know that we need to make sure they're complying with code. We need to make sure they actually have a business license because they are conducting business within the city, and that they're paying the small amount of transit occupancy tax that they should be collecting from their renters. So we're baby stepping this. This is step one, identify and educate, and then we'll be looking to register business licenses in TOT. No, this is going to be slow because this is a new program. It affects the community, it affects homeowners, it affects neighbors. And so we're going to take this more along the lines of community speed than lightning speed.
It might affect ADUs in the future.
It might affect ADUs in the future, correct?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you for the update.
So you're effectively using the business license, which we no longer treat as a business license, as a registration method.
We will use the business license to register them, but we're actually going to employ a consultant to help us identify those rentals within the city so that we can get a broader scope of the rentals. We believe there may be up to 40 rentals, but that not all of them with the new law are going to be allowed to continue. So we're getting some help on just identifying this particular business that we're looking at or organization that we're looking at. Also has access to the database to allow us to know how much revenue they're collecting. So we'll be able to prove out easier what the TOT dollars should be.
Who would be responsible for enforcing the new law?
Welcome to code enforcement.
Welcome to code enforcement.
So in other words, she's creating more work for my
I
department.
am, yeah. Actually, the state is creating more work for you. I'm
Gonna
just,
hire a few more.
pointing them in your direction.
And as Nita and I talked about, within the county, we have a wealth of knowledge because they just went through this process in the Tahoe area.
Yeah, and this, part of our process is we may come back to council. We're going to be meeting internally as a focus group with CDD and public safety to talk about what does the city want short-term rentals to look like? And I know we don't have many short-term rentals, but it's almost, I think, better for us to develop now what it is we want short-term rentals to look like before we're looking at lots of short-term rentals and having to rein in short-term rentals and deal with them if they should become an issue or a nuisance to neighbors. So we want to develop the groundwork now of what the city wants. And then once we know what we want internally, we're definitely planning not on reinventing the wheel and stealing from our neighbors and using their programs to help us develop changes to the municipal code that would come back at a much later time.
Great, appreciate that.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is to discuss and provide exits and then consider adoption of the resolution approving our draft responses to the Placer County Grand Jury report of this year. So,
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take this one, give Ms. Racker a little break here from the Nita Racker Show. The item before you, 10D, is to review and give staff direction on any revisions to the letters that are required to respond to the two recent reports issued by the Placer County Grand Jury. So as most people know, the Placer Grand Jury annually conducts reviews. They receive resident complaints. They also investigate issues brought to them by their own jury members. And this year, we learned that the Placer County Grand Jury investigated two separate areas with the City of Lincoln and issued two different reports. The first one has to do with the City of Lincoln's implementation of rate increases. And the second one had to do with the Titan missile site and the contamination there and what the City of Lincoln is doing or has been doing regarding that location. With respect to the rate report, it was a very lengthy analysis, and at the outset, I really want to give kudos to Ms. Racker and her utility staff, and also to the City Council for really giving staff good direction and being stalwart in its efforts to help bring our utility funds to right the ship there. Because the end result was a report by the Placer County Grand Jury that found that our process in raising the rates was not only Proposition 218 compliant, but was exceptionally transparent through the process of information on the web, also multiple public hearings and workshops and opportunities for the public to come forward and be heard. So the end result was their report that essentially listed a number of findings. We were also asked to respond to several of the recommendations that they issued in that report. The only finding that we were requested to respond to was that the Lincoln City Council agrees with the 2023 Raftellus Water and Wastewater Study Report and findings. And the proposed response states that both this council and Mr. Scully, the city manager, who was also asked to separately respond, do agree with those findings. And then there are a number of recommendations that are made by the Placer County Grand Jury. Well, I guess in this one, there's actually only two. One is that by March 1st of next year, the council will continue to support the 10-year water rate increase outlined in that study. So that's the implementation of the progressive smaller rate increases over time that were the subject of that report. And then secondarily, the council will review the 10-year water plan rates annually at a public meeting, which we had already discussed implementing that as a policy and procedure and giving the council the opportunity essentially to ratify its previous actions. And so the proposed response essentially states that we agree with those recommendations, with the limited exception that this council is really unable to bind future councils for a 10-year period. And so future council, there may be different circumstances that come forward and things need to be looked at and changed. But generally speaking, as we sit here today, we agree with those findings. So I will defer to the council how you wish to take this. Do you wish to ask questions and discuss each report separately, or would you prefer I finish my report and we discuss both of them together?
Doesn't matter to me.
why don't you go to both of them?
Go ahead. Okay.
I only have one comment on one of them, so.
Okay, very good. So the second report that was issued by the Placer County Grand Jury relates to, it was had a very creative title. It was From Missiles to Meadows, Restoring Nature's Balance. And it has to do with the Titan missile site that is outside of the Lincoln community, Del Webb community, that's been the subject at various city council meetings, various public meetings up at the Del Webb buildings, their HOA buildings, and also a personal project of council member Lauritsen, who resides in that district. Ultimately, the grand jury did a very good job of distilling a lot of information that was spread over since, I think, the early 1960s, when the Titan missile site was actually initially implemented and constructed. They made a number of findings that they asked the council to comment upon. And again, with these findings, the council can either agree, disagree, and provide reasons as to why they disagree, or whether they can't meet the recommendation as proposed by the grand jury. Staff believes that the recommendations that were made were very reasonable, and they largely have to do with public information and disclosing information on the website. We have agreed with this finding. And then also making some findings agreeing with some of the information that's been provided to us by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so my lawyer hat had to go on, and I had to indicate in the responses that while we're really not in a position to be able to respond on behalf of the Army Corps, we generally agree with the propositions as presented by the Placer grand jury. And so then with respect to their recommendations, again, the website, more public disclosure of information, council to provide the community with a quarterly status report at its council meetings, and to encourage the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who will be overseeing the remediation at this site, to somehow live stream their meetings of the RAB, which is the Restoration Advisory Board that will be working on how to implement restoration and remediation at this area. And then finally, they're asking that by September 1st of this year, the City Council appoint a representative to attend those quarterly RAB meetings. And so while not a member of the RAB, that appointee would be able to attend as a member of the public and then report back to your council. And so generally, we agree with all of the recommendations. I know that Councilmember Mayor Crosskin actually has a suggested revision to response number 4. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and listen to any proposed revisions, and staff stands ready.
And full disclosure, the recommendation is that the city council will appoint a city representative to attend the quarterly RAB meeting. I don't have a problem with that, except I don't know what the word representative means.
Doesn't necessarily mean council member.
Correct.
No, right.
It could in fact be a staff member.
It doesn't say council member. It just says a representative. So I have no problem with that. Problem I have is with our current response. The recommendation has been implemented as the council member from District 4 has been and will continue to be involved in the RAB meetings. Can be involved in the RAB meetings all he wants. We did not appoint him. So I have a problem with that. To take care of that, I would like to say that the city council will appoint a city representative to attend the quarterly and report back to the council by September 1st. I'll agree with that, but I don't agree with our current response.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
So
You're-
now I waffled on, can we do that by September 1st? Because nominally, you got to look at the RAB's going to be running for 5 years at least. Okay, the commitment is until it's completed. Is that,
So we've got to pick one of the
is that an
younger staff.
appointment? Is that an appointment that council makes among their other appointments for the next 5 years? Yearly, or is it a separate item on an agenda? Treated differently? If it's, so I don't know what the implementation is.
I would give that authority to determine the representative to the city manager. Choose from his staff who is the most appropriate person to send. And if he,
I certainly would expect him to recommend that. The recommendation is that the city council appoints somebody, not a council person, but he appoints somebody.
so we could
And
say the
it-
city manager or his designee.
I'm okay with that. So that's how we're going to answer it then.
Okay, just so I'm
By
clear,
September 21st, the city council will appoint the city manager or his designee as to attend the quarterly restoration board meeting. Okay, it's fine. We do also have to change the form
yes,
that
that accompanies
someplace
this.
in there, that the handwritten form.
We can do that.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Well, we all know the rule. If you're not here, be careful. You might get appointed to something. City manager is out, so.
Yeah, he's appointed.
I think
We,
he's
we
watching
can, if
now.
council's more comfortable with it, make that revision and put it on consent for the next meeting. This isn't due for a
Yeah,
while.
no, right.
Would you prefer to do that?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make that revision and we'll have it on consent then for the next meeting.
Yeah, there's no hurry on this, right? We usually don't do it.
But maybe the August meeting, because I think our agenda reports were due already for the next meeting. So
Usually we don't want to answer this stuff till the last minute because it's so bad. But again, staff is to be congratulated.
Right, yeah. No, great job. So on the recommendation that we request the Army Corps to live stream their meetings, I mean, they can if they want to, and they can't if they don't want
We
to,
can
right?
make the request.
can
It
make
doesn't
the
mean they'll
okay.
honor
We
it.
request.
Yeah.
That's-
Sometimes I feel like the grand jury gives us these recommendations that want us to do things that are completely out of our control. And it's annoying, but,
They want us
Also
to
true.
do it. This isn't out of our control.
yeah, well, we can make the requests, right? And then we are going to create a web page for this on our, okay. That's also
Yeah.
annoying, okay.
We can do that.
Well, it's just a lot more work for our staff, which, whatever, okay,
I mean,
yeah. Change the language and okay, all right, well.
Okay.
That's good, that's fine, yeah,
noted, we have direction.
yes.
Thank you.
And the other one on the water rates,
Oh,
Thumbs
it's
up.
totally fine. Again,
again.
no, again, they can't just stick to the water rates. They have to drag us through the mud again, because that's what they do. And so, but it's nice to have the last sentence, good job, Lincoln,
Keep
So,
you doing it.
yeah, so, yeah.
We love it.
You can
Guys,
always
you're the-
count on me to say how I really feel about this, but thank you. This presentation is great. You guys did a good job. I'm fine with our responses, but maybe they'll leave us alone for a while.
Really what they're saying is, Lincoln, you're the best.
No, yeah, no, they like to, yeah, it's ridiculous. I'm done with
Well,
that.
typically, the grand jury responds to a letter from someone. So when we say,
Yeah.
hopefully they'll leave us alone for a while,
Yeah,
that's a broader,
yeah. Well, no, I get it. I get it. Just,
Yeah. Three ways of getting issues in front of them. Two of which are from the public. And you,
oh, I
And then, thank you. And just to be clear for the minutes, then we're taking no action on resolution 2024-151, and we'll be bringing this back as a package
Great, thank
for
you.
consent.
Yep.
okay, Next item on the agenda. City manager reports.
Yeah, I don't have anything significant to report. I would just bring everyone's attention to all of the fantastic 4th of July events, the parade, the fireworks, even though it was very, very hot, that for the most part, that the parade went off well and was well received. And we did get some calls afterwards and during the event and that evening for illegal fireworks. I'm going to say that police responded to over 70 calls for
How many?
illegal fireworks. 70, sir.
Wow.
So, but
And they were all illegal.
We received 72 complaints for illegal fireworks. It's incredibly difficult to locate those by the time we get there.
Because they're going off all over.
Because they're
the place.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, yeah.
Don't we have to catch them in the act of that to be able to enforce our fine that we have?
Correct. It's a misdemeanor, and by law, we need to be able to observe the act in progress to be able to cite for it.
And we can't use video from residents? Or
Not to make an arrest, correct?
Thank you.
Well, so I was going to mention this in our information, but since you brought up the 4th of July, if I may, I mean, there's always things that can be done better, right? But it was, even though it was hot, people showed up to the park a little bit later, but it was a phenomenal success and greatly in part to Lincoln Fire Department. Because this year we had the same pyro company, but they had a newer crew and they were wilting in the heat. And so they were, most of their team was not able to stick with it to get it all finished in time. And we had about 10 deep in our fire department there, helping them, getting it finished. And so the show was amazing, and nobody that didn't know anything wouldn't know that there was any, like, we're all crossing our fingers, right? If it wasn't for the fire department, we would not have had a show this year because just the heat was so bad. They were just dying and they were having to walk away and rest and whatever, except for a couple of their team. And I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And I feel like I want to do something special at a different meeting, but we owe a great deal of gratitude to them that they stayed there in the heat and they made sure it got done, and the show was phenomenal.
And they got to play with explosives.
And they, yes,
so-
yes, so
was-
there's the
How-
upside for them, but yes, and all the other activities went really well, and so it was a great day. It was hot, but it was great.
I wonder how many other cities the fire department puts on
Yeah.
fireworks show.
I don't know, but
generally the fire marshal is involved in the fireworks show in some respect, but no, it's not often that the firefighters.
yeah,
are
normally they're
handling
there, they're checking
explosives.
things out, they're making sure it's
Yeah.
safe, but
Yeah.
this year they literally saved the day. And so you can pass along my thanks, but I want to do some kind of special things for them, you know, when we have a chance to organize that. And then always the police department, we're roaming around, doing a good job, keeping everybody safe. And so another successful year.
Well, can I put a plug in also for the 4th of July Foundation? Because I wanted to
Right,
kind
right.
of experience what they had to say, do, and so I stayed clear till like midnight helping to clean up, and they got a hard job. They do
Yeah.
a great deal too.
It's, yeah, I mean, we have the community volunteers that come in through the day, but literally this thing is put on by about 8 people.
Yes.
And it's amazing. So I know Mayor Carlson doesn't like
Right.
talking about 4th of July,
Yeah.
but,
You're down the agenda a little.
well, she brought it up. That's why, she was talking about the 4th of July. That's why I was just commenting.
This is
don't-
information.
Any,
City
any
manager's
more
report.
No other city manager
you.
reports.
council initiated business?
Meeting's getting away from you, Dan.
Yeah.
I have none.
Rain today.
I have one request. So with the council's decision to name or honor part of the 193 for Joey Mitchell, his public celebration of life is this Friday in Bayside at Granite Bay at 11:30. And I was wondering if there's anybody, any council member or staff member who can go and do the presentation of that, because I'll be out of the country and Sean is not, he's on vacation. And we would really like to have, they would really like to have somebody from the city. It's Friday, this Friday, the 12th, at 11:30 at Bayside in Granite Bay, at the church there. And if anybody from the city could go and do that, I would really appreciate it. I'm really sad. I got to go to the private funeral, but I'm sad that I can't be there, but, you know.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do
Would,
that.
would you? Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And if, are you able to go with her? That would, I mean, if you can. Okay, okay. Nita, thank you. Really appreciate that. And if you can't, Paul, that's fine. Thank you, Nita. And I'll let Joey know that you're going to come.
Chief Alves just let me know he's also attending.
Oh, awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you. I'll tell Joey that you're both coming. Blessings, blessings. Thank you. That's it, Mayor. That's all I have.
Committee reports.
One quick one from me. The SACOG Board of Directors was invited to tour Beale Air Force Base. I've toured it many times. This was by far the most extensive tour that I've ever been on. And it, I think the real point of the meeting, besides making those who may not be familiar with Beale aware of what they do there, was to communicate that, at least at this point in time, the Air Force is going to divest itself of the U-2 program, and along with that, the T-38 program that we see flying over Lincoln all the time. The message that they wanted to convey back to our individual communities is that Beale is more important than it has ever been. And just because those platforms are potentially leaving doesn't mean the missions don't continue, and in fact continue to grow. There's over $600 million worth of projects underway on base right now, going to grow over the next 10 years to over $1 billion. Their data collection that they use the U-2 for is being replaced by much more sensitive sensors. And so that mission is not changed. That mission will grow. Space Force is interested. They have 3 different squads interested in coming there. They are already running the big PAPAWS radar system up on the hill. Space Force has control of that at this point in time. But the message they wanted out was not only is Beale doing well, Beale is being well funded, its future is strongly guaranteed into the future. And they have shifted, they've maxed out at about 500 homes on base. They're fixing up some of the dorm rooms for the young airmen, but they are no longer providing large scale housing on base, and those folks are going to be living in our communities. One of the interesting things that was said by the colonel who is second in command right now, and there is today was the command change at Beale, so there is a new commander in place as of today. But one of the messages that was sent forward was, with their airmen living in our communities, Highway 65, and this is his words, is a national security risk to the lives of our airmen. That narrow 2-lane stretch, mostly north of here, puts their airmen at risk every single day. And anything we can do to resolve that issue.
How about anything they can do to resolve that issue? That's interesting. That's really interesting. Wow.
Which also, that whole thing means they're not going to provide any equipment for static display anymore.
It doesn't necessarily mean that at all. I mean, I'll share with you offline the fact that, well, I'll say it this way. The deputy commander made it clear that he would rather see the U-2s go to static display in a community like Lincoln than to the boneyard.
Right.
And so anything that we might want to advance there, they are open to.
No, I was thinking more of fly-ins and those
Well,
kind
they're
of
not going to pay for it, but if we can raise the money to get a U-2 here and put it on static display, that may be a path.
I sat in for Paul for PCTPA, and it was just nothing major, just general business, and yeah, so.
Part as well.
Yeah, SPART as well. Yeah, pretty simple. So, yeah.
Have mine coming up.
You have no information on this. Information items.
Sorry. Yeah.
With a sheet sticking out.
Yeah.
So really just for the public to know, I forget the designation of the steam engine that's coming through is going to be in Roseville for people to see on Friday. That's touring the entire country, the largest active
Largest,
steam engine
right.
in the United States. What do they call it, the
Built.
big boy?
Designed and built specifically for going
Nice.
over the mountains. Okay,
Good. Awesome. Wow, super weird. Like glad to have
you.
you and welcome to the
Everybody.
FIAC. But there's like
Appreciate
nobody
that.
here.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, staff.